My mother-in-law announced that she will wear my wedding dress to my own wedding day to honor my marriage. But she was not prepared for the backlash she was about to receive. When Jake proposed 2 years ago, his mother Carol immediately made it about her. She cried about her baby getting married, pulled out her own wedding album, and spent 3 hours telling me how perfect her wedding was. Every single detail apparently outdid anything modern weddings could offer. Her dress alone cost $8,000 in 1994. She still had it preserved in a special closet, would take it out monthly to show visitors. The first warning sign was when we went dress shopping. Carol invited herself, then spent the entire appointment telling me why each dress was wrong. Too simple, too flashy, too white, not white enough. When I finally found the one, a beautiful silk dress with hand-sewn pearls, Carol said it was nice, but nothing compared to hers. She actually asked the consultant if they had anything similar to 1990s styles. The consultant looked confused. Carol pulled up photos of her dress on her phone, shoved them in everyone's face. I bought my dress anyway. Carol sulked the entire drive home. For 6 months, every wedding planning session became the Carol show. She'd interrupt cake tasting to describe her 7-tier cake. She'd hijack venue tours to explain how her country club was superior. When I picked roses for centerpieces, she spent 20 minutes explaining why her calla lilies were more elegant. Jake just let her talk, said she was excited. 2 months before the wedding, Carol started a diet, said she wanted to look good in photos. Then she joined a gym, hired a trainer, bought hundreds of dollars of supplements. I thought it was nice she wanted to be healthy. Jake thought his mom was finally focusing on herself instead of our wedding. We were both idiots. 3 weeks before the wedding, Carol asked to see my dress again, said she wanted to picture the whole event. I was at work, told her she could go to my apartment since she had a spare key for emergencies. She stayed there for 4 hours. My neighbor texted asking if everything was okay. When I got home, my dress was on my bed, not in its bag. Carol had tried it on. There were deodorant marks on the inside, her makeup on the neckline. She'd taken selfies in my mirror, left them up on her phone when she forgot to close the camera app later at dinner. I was furious. Jake confronted her. She cried, said she just wanted to remember what it felt like to be a bride. He fell for it. The day before the wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, Carol stood up for a speech. She talked about her own wedding again, how magical it was, how she wished she could relive it. Then she said something that made everyone freeze. She announced that since her original dress no longer fit, and since she'd been working so hard to get in shape, she'd be honoring both marriages by wearing my dress to the ceremony. She'd already arranged it with the church. She'd stand next to the priest as a symbol of marriage continuity or some insane logic. The room went silent. My dad's face turned red. My mom gripped her fork so tight it bent. Jake's father looked at his wife like she'd grown 3 heads. Carol kept talking, explaining how beautiful it would be. 2 generations of brides united. She'd already told her friends, posted about it in her book club Facebook group. 200 women were apparently supporting this beautiful gesture. I stood up and said no. 1 word. Carol acted shocked. Said I was being selfish, that dresses were meant to be worn, that it would still be mine after. Jake finally found his spine and told his mother she was insane. She started sobbing about how nobody appreciated her sacrifices, how she'd given up everything for her family, how one day of feeling special wasn't too much to ask. Jake's father, quiet Robert, who never said much, stood up and told Carol to shut up. Actually said those words. Said she was embarrassing herself and ruining their son's wedding. Carol ran out crying. The wedding day arrived. I had my cousin guard my dress, literally stand outside the room where I was getting ready. Carol showed up in a white ball gown. Not just any white ball gown either. This thing had layers and layers of fabric that pooled on the floor behind her like she was getting married herself. The train had to be at least 6 feet long. Carol stood in the church lobby smiling at arriving guests like she was the bride. I was still in my prep room when Josefina burst through the door. She asked if I knew Carol was out there in white. I told her yes. I knew Carol would try something. Josefina asked point blank if I wanted her to handle it before the ceremony started. I said yes, please handle it, because I was about to lose my mind. Josefina nodded and walked out. I could hear her heels clicking fast down the hallway. My dad arrived 5 minutes later. He came to check on me before the ceremony. Someone must have told him about Carol's dress because his face was already purple when he walked past my door. I heard him in the hallway asking where Robert was. His voice was loud and angry. He found Robert and Jake near the lobby. I heard my dad tell them they needed to deal with this right now. He said if Carol didn't leave, he was calling off the wedding until she was gone. My dad never yells, but he was yelling now. Jake came rushing toward the lobby. I cracked my door open to watch. Jake walked right up to his mother in front of everyone who was arriving. He told her she needed to leave and change into proper mother of the groom clothes. His voice was shaking, but he said it loud enough for people to hear. Carol's face crumpled. She started crying immediately. The tears were instant, like she'd been waiting to cry. She said she just wanted to feel special. She said nobody appreciated her sacrifices. She said she gave up everything for her family. Guests walking in stopped and stared. Some of them backed up toward the door like they wanted to leave. Carol kept crying louder. Then Robert did something I never expected. He walked over and stood directly in front of Carol. He physically blocked her from moving toward the church entrance. Robert told her she was embarrassing their entire family. He said she needed to go home right now. His voice was calm but firm. Carol turned to the guests who were standing around watching. She asked them if they thought she was being unreasonable. She asked if they thought a mother shouldn't feel included in her son's wedding. The guests just looked at the floor. Nobody made eye contact with her. One couple actually turned around and walked back outside. My mom appeared from somewhere. She walked up to Carol very calmly. Mom told Carol she would drive her home to change. Her voice was kind, but you could tell it wasn't a suggestion. Carol wiped her eyes and said no. She said she wasn't missing her son's wedding over a dress color. She actually said that. Like the problem was just the color and not the fact that she was wearing a wedding dress to someone else's wedding. Josefina had clearly had enough. She waved over two ushers who were standing near the entrance. She told them not to let Carol into the ceremony space until she changed clothes. The ushers looked uncomfortable, but they moved to block the doorway. Carol's crying turned into full sobbing. She started yelling that everyone was ganging up on her. She said she was attacked for wanting to celebrate her son. Her voice echoed through the whole lobby. More guests arrived and immediately looked confused. Some of them asked if everything was okay. Nobody knew what to tell them. Then Jake's Aunt Margie showed up. She was late, apparently. Margie walked in, took one look at Carol in the white dress, and her face went hard. She didn't even greet anyone. She just walked straight to Carol and grabbed her arm. Margie pulled Carol toward a side room off the lobby. Carol was still crying and protesting. Margie shut the door behind them. We could hear them through the door. Margie's voice was loud and angry. She told Carol she was acting exactly like their mother did. She said Carol was ruining another family event just like their mother ruined Margie's wedding 30 years ago. Carol tried to talk, but Margie kept going. She said Carol needed to grow up and stop making everything about herself. The conversation got more heated. Carol was crying and Margie was not backing down. This went on for 15 minutes. Guests were standing in the lobby pretending not to listen, but everyone was listening. Finally, the door opened. Margie walked out first. Her face was red, but she looked satisfied. She announced to everyone standing there that Carol would be leaving to change. She said if Carol wasn't back in appropriate clothes within an hour, the wedding would proceed without her. Carol came out behind Margie. Her makeup was running down her face. She was still crying, but quietly now. She didn't look at anyone. She walked toward the exit with her head down. The massive train of her dress dragged behind her on the floor. Robert followed her out to make sure she actually left. I watched from my cracked door as Carol disappeared outside. I was shaking so hard I had to sit down. Sybil was still standing guard outside my room. She came in and asked if I was okay. My bridesmaids crowded around trying to calm me down. They kept saying everything would be fine now. But I wasn't fine. My wedding day was starting with family drama instead of joy. I was supposed to be happy and excited. Instead, I was angry and stressed. Carol was still managing to make this entire day about her even after leaving. One of my bridesmaids brought me water. Another one fixed my makeup where I'd started crying. They were all talking at once, trying to distract me. Then I heard a knock on my door. It was Jake. He said my name through the door. He said he was so sorry. He said he should have shut this down months ago when Carol first started acting crazy. He said he was sorry his mother was ruining our day. His voice sounded broken. I walked to the door but didn't open it. Bad luck to see the groom before the wedding, and we'd had enough bad luck already. I told him through the door that I loved him. I told him this wasn't his fault. But then I told him something else. I said his mother was never getting unsupervised access to our future children. I said it clearly so he understood I meant it. There was silence on the other side of the door. Then Jake said okay. He said he understood and he agreed. He said he loved me and he'd see me at the altar. His footsteps walked away down the hall. 45 minutes crawled by while I sat in that room trying to fix my makeup and calm down. My bridesmaids kept telling me everything would be okay, but I could see they were worried too. Sybil stayed at the door like a guard dog. Then someone knocked and said Carol was back. I looked through the crack in the door and saw her walking down the hall in a navy blue dress that actually looked right for a mother of the groom. Her eyes were super red and puffy from crying. Her makeup was smeared all down her cheeks. She looked like a mess, but at least she wasn't wearing white anymore. Margie walked right next to her with her hand on Carol's arm like she was afraid Carol might run away or do something else crazy. They walked past my door and Carol didn't even look over. She just kept her head down and let Margie lead her toward the ceremony space. I heard Josefina talking to them in the hall. She was telling Carol where to sit and reminding her that she needed to stay in her seat during the whole ceremony. Carol's voice was quiet when she answered. I couldn't hear what she said, but she sounded tired. The next hour was weird because I could hear people arriving and talking in the lobby, but I was stuck in my room waiting. My dad came to check on me twice. His face was still red and angry. He kept asking if I wanted him to kick Carol out completely. I told him no, because that would just make Jake feel bad and cause more problems, but I appreciated that he wanted to protect me. My mom came in too and hugged me for a long time. She didn't say anything about Carol. She just told me I looked beautiful and that this was still going to be a good day. I tried to believe her. Finally, Josefina knocked and said it was time to start. The ceremony was running an hour late because of all the Carol drama. Some guests had been sitting in the church for over an hour waiting. I felt bad about that, but there was nothing I could do about it now. My bridesmaids lined up and started walking down the aisle one by one. I could hear the music playing. Then it was my turn. My dad took my arm and we stood at the back of the church. I could see all the guests turning around to look at me. I could see Jake standing at the front next to the minister. And I could see Carol sitting in the front row in her navy dress with Margie right next to her. My dad squeezed my arm and we started walking. He was still tense. I could feel how mad he was through his arm. But he smiled at me and whispered that he loved me. We walked down that long aisle and I tried to focus on Jake. When Jake saw me, his eyes filled up with tears. His whole face changed. He looked so happy and relieved. For just a minute, I forgot about all the drama and just felt excited to marry him. All the stress from Carol's white dress and the fighting and the delays just faded away. It was just me and Jake, and this moment we'd been planning for 2 years. My dad gave me a kiss on the cheek and put my hand in Jake's hand. Then he went to sit down next to my mom. The minister started talking about marriage and love and commitment. I tried to pay attention, but then I heard this loud sniffle from the front row. It was Carol. She was crying really loud. Not quiet crying. Loud sobbing sounds that everyone could hear. Several guests turned around to look at her instead of watching us. That's exactly what she wanted. She wanted everyone looking at her and feeling sorry for her. Margie leaned over and whispered something to Carol, but Carol just kept crying. The minister kept talking, but people were distracted now. I saw some guests whispering to each other and glancing at Carol. Jake squeezed my hand and I could tell he was embarrassed. We got through our vows even though Carol sniffled and sobbed through the whole thing. When the minister said we were married and Jake could kiss me, Carol let out this huge dramatic sob, but I didn't care anymore. I kissed my husband and we walked back down the aisle together as Mr. and Mrs. Donaldson. The reception was at a hotel ballroom across town. Everyone drove over and gathered in the lobby area before the big entrance. Josephina was organizing everyone into the right order. Wedding party first, then parents, then us. I was standing with Jake getting ready to walk in when Carol suddenly appeared next to us. She tried to link arms with Jake like she was going to walk in with us, like she was part of our couple. Josephina saw it happening and moved so fast. She stepped right between Carol and Jake and physically blocked Carol from getting any closer. Josephina told Carol very firmly that parents enter separately after the wedding party. She pointed to where Robert was standing and told Carol to go stand with her husband. Carol's face got all red, but she couldn't argue with Josephina. Robert came over and took Carol's arm and led her away. We finally made our entrance as husband and wife and everyone clapped and cheered. Dinner started and everything seemed okay for a while. Then it was time for toasts. My dad stood up first and said some really nice things about me and Jake and our future together. Everyone clapped. Then Carol stood up. She had a microphone and she started talking, and talking, and talking. She went on for 15 minutes about her own wedding in 1994. How beautiful it was. How perfect everything was. How magical she felt. She barely mentioned Jake and me at all. Maybe 2 sentences about us in the whole speech. The rest was all about her. People started looking uncomfortable. Some guests were checking their phones. My dad's face got red again. Then right in the middle of one of Carol's sentences about her 7-layer cake, my dad stood up. He didn't wait for her to finish. He just stood up and said he wanted to propose another toast. He raised his glass and started talking about Jake and me and how proud he was. Carol stopped talking and sat down. She looked shocked that someone interrupted her, but everyone else looked relieved. They all raised their glasses and cheered for my dad's toast. After dinner, the DJ announced it was time for our first dance as husband and wife. Jake stood up and reached for my hand. But before we could get to the dance floor, Carol grabbed Jake's other arm. She tried to pull him toward the floor like they were going to dance. She said something about the mother-son dance. The DJ said no, first dance is for bride and groom only. Mother-son dance comes later. Jake pulled his arm away from his mom and told her no. He said it firmly. He took my hand and led me to the middle of the floor. Carol was left standing there by herself looking stupid. Everyone saw it. We danced to our song and it was perfect. Later, my mom found me near the bathroom. She pulled me aside and her face looked serious. She told me she'd just been in the bathroom and heard Carol talking to her friends. Carol was saying that my dress was nice, but nothing compared to what she wore in 1994. She was still comparing, still trying to make everything about her, even after everything that happened. I felt something change inside me right then. I decided that Carol was getting almost no contact with us going forward. Maybe we'd see her at holidays with other family around. But no more weekly dinners, no more random drop-ins, no more letting her take over our lives. When it was time to cut the cake, the photographer set up the shot. Just Jake and me with the cake. But Carol pushed her way to the front. She squeezed in right next to us. The photographer tried to ask her to step back, but Carol pretended not to hear. She smiled big for every photo. Her face is right there next to ours in half the pictures. Later, when we got the photos back, there she was, ruining our cake-cutting photos just like she tried to ruin everything else. Near the end of the reception, I saw Robert pull Jake aside. They went out to the hallway to talk privately. Jake told me later what happened. Robert apologized for not controlling Carol better over the years. He said he'd enabled her behavior by staying quiet and letting her do whatever she wanted. He admitted that his silence made everything worse. Jake told his father that they both needed to do better going forward, that they needed to set boundaries with Carol and actually enforce them. Robert agreed. He said he was going to start standing up to Carol more, that he was tired of her making everything about herself. It was the longest conversation Jake had ever had with his father about real stuff. The reception ended and we left for our hotel. Carol tried to follow us out to say goodbye, but we were already in the car. We drove away and I felt this huge relief wash over me. We were married. Despite everything Carol did to try to ruin it, we were married. Jake held my hand in the car and told me he was sorry again. I told him to stop apologizing. His mother's behavior wasn't his fault, but I also told him that things had to change. We couldn't keep letting her control everything. He agreed. He said he'd been thinking the same thing. We checked into our hotel suite and finally we were alone. Just us. No Carol, no drama, just me and my husband starting our life together. I barely had time to catch my breath before Margie found me near the gift table. She pulled me aside and her face looked serious. She told me we needed to talk about Carol. I felt my stomach drop because I thought something else had happened. But Margie just wanted to warn me. She said Carol had always been like this, intensely jealous of other women having special moments. Margie told me about her own wedding 30 years ago. Carol had shown up in a cream-colored dress that looked white in photos. She'd tried to stand in the family photos like she was part of the wedding party. She'd given a toast that was really about her own marriage. Margie said she'd spent 3 decades watching Carol sabotage or hijack every family milestone. Graduations, anniversaries, baby showers. Carol always found a way to make it about her. Margie squeezed my hand and told me to keep strong boundaries. She said Carol would never change and I needed to protect my marriage from the start. I thanked her and felt this mix of validation and sadness. Validation because it wasn't just me seeing this behavior. Sadness because Jake had grown up with this and thought it was normal. A few minutes later, I headed toward the bathroom. Carol appeared out of nowhere and blocked my path. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. She grabbed my hands before I could pull away. She started apologizing in this tearful voice, said she just wanted to feel included in the wedding planning, that she felt pushed aside and ignored for months. I pulled my hands back and looked at her directly. I told her there was a big difference between inclusion and domination, that she'd crossed that line months ago when she tried on my dress without permission, when she announced she'd wear it to my wedding. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. When she showed up today in a white ball gown, Carol's face crumpled and she started to say something, but I walked past her into the bathroom. I was done having this conversation, done explaining basic boundaries to a grown woman. When I came back out, Jake's college friends were standing near the bar. I could hear them laughing and making jokes. One of them said something about the white dress attempt. Another one made a comment about mother of the groom gone wild. They were loud enough that other guests could hear. I saw Carol standing about 20 feet away. Her face went red and tears started rolling down her cheeks again. She looked around like she was searching for support, but people just looked away or pretended not to notice. Robert walked over to Carol and took her arm. He led her toward the exit doors. I watched them go outside together. Through the glass, I could see Robert talking and Carol crying. His face looked stern. His hands were moving as he spoke. This was the most active parenting I'd ever seen him do. They stayed outside for almost 20 minutes. My bridesmaids noticed what was happening. They formed this protective circle around me for the rest of the reception. Whenever Carol came near, one of them would intercept. Sybil was especially good at it. She'd step right in front of Carol and start talking about something random, or she'd steer me in a different direction. She told me later that she'd been waiting months to play bouncer, that watching Carol try on my dress without permission had made her furious. The photographer started setting up for the bouquet toss. All the single women gathered on the dance floor, but Carol pushed her way into the group. She was married, had been married for 30 years, but there she was, shoving between 20-year-olds trying to catch the bouquet. My maid of honor saw what was happening. When I threw the bouquet, she lunged forward and batted it hard to the left, away from where Carol was standing. A teenage cousin caught it instead. Carol's face showed she knew exactly what had happened. The photographer pulled me aside while people were dancing. He spoke quietly and looked uncomfortable. He said he'd noticed Carol inserting herself into a lot of photos, pushing into shots that should just be me and Jake. He offered to Photoshop her out of the pictures where she didn't belong. I was so tempted to say yes, to erase her from our wedding photos completely, but I told him no. I wanted to keep the pictures as they were, as evidence of what we'd dealt with, as a reminder of why we needed strong boundaries going forward. As the reception started winding down, Carol made one last attempt at attention. She walked up to the DJ booth and tried to request the microphone. She wanted to give another speech about marriage advice. The DJ looked at me and I shook my head. He pretended not to hear Carol's request. He started playing our exit song instead. Carol stood there looking confused and hurt, but the song was playing and everyone was cheering. Jake and I grabbed our things and headed for the door. I'd checked earlier and Carol was in the bathroom. We deliberately left while she was gone. No goodbye scene, No final hug. No last-minute drama. We just slipped out and got in the car. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. A text from Margie saying Carol came out of the bathroom and cried about being excluded from our departure. I turned my phone off. We got to the honeymoon suite and finally locked the door. Just us. No family. No Carol. Jake sat on the bed and put his head in his hands. I sat next to him and we had the most serious conversation of our relationship. I told him we needed real boundaries with his mother going forward. Not suggestions, not requests. Actual enforced boundaries. He agreed immediately. Said he'd been thinking the same thing all day. I told him I wanted him to go to therapy, to learn how to handle his mother's manipulation, to protect our marriage from her constant interference. He pulled out his phone right then and started searching for therapists. He said he'd make an appointment as soon as we got back from the honeymoon. We talked for 2 hours about what boundaries looked like. Limited phone calls, no unannounced visits, no involvement in our major decisions, consequences when she crossed lines. Jake agreed to all of it, said he should have done this years ago. We finally went to sleep around 2 in the morning. Exhausted, but relieved to have a plan. The next morning, I woke up first. Jake's phone was on the nightstand, and I could see the screen lighting up over and over. 17 text messages from Carol. I woke Jake up and showed him. He read through them with this tired expression. They were all variations of the same thing. Why did we leave without saying goodbye? How hurt she felt. How she just wanted to be part of our special day. How we were being cruel and unfair. Jake turned off his phone completely. He looked at me and said we were starting our honeymoon right now. No more Carol. No more drama. Just us focusing on our marriage. We ordered room service for breakfast and didn't turn our phones back on for 3 days. On day 4 of the honeymoon, we turned our phones back on. Mine buzzed non-stop for 5 minutes straight. Jake's did the same thing. We looked at each other and knew it was Carol before we even checked. She'd sent 43 messages over 3 days. The first few were asking why we weren't responding. Then they got angry about being ignored on our special time. Then they turned into long paragraphs about how hurt she felt after the wedding. How everyone ganged up on her. How she was just trying to be part of our celebration. How the white dress was a genuine mistake and she'd changed right away. She rewrote the whole wedding day in her messages. Made herself the victim. Made us the cruel ones who embarrassed her in front of everyone. Jake read through them with his jaw tight. I watched him scroll and scroll. Finally, he started typing. His message was short and clear. He told her the behavior at the wedding was unacceptable. That she'd tried to wear my actual wedding dress and when that failed, showed up in white anyway. That we needed space and time to start our marriage without her constant interference. That there would be serious consequences if she continued to disrespect our boundaries. He hit send and turned his phone face down on the table. We spent the rest of our honeymoon actually enjoying ourselves. Swimming in the ocean, eating at local restaurants, walking on the beach at sunset. No phones, no Carol, no drama. Just us being married and happy. But I knew it wouldn't last. We flew home 6 days later, exhausted but relaxed. Our apartment felt different somehow. Like we were different people returning to our old life. I unpacked while Jake checked the mail. He came back inside holding a stack of wedding cards. We sat on the couch opening them together. Sweet messages from friends and family, gift cards, checks, normal wedding stuff. Then Jake pulled out his laptop to check something. He froze, staring at the screen. I asked what was wrong. He turned the laptop toward me. Carol had posted wedding photos all over Facebook, but not the real story. She'd carefully selected pictures that made her look like the perfect mother of the groom. There she was in the navy dress looking elegant and appropriate, smiling next to Jake and me, hugging Robert, dancing at the reception. Her captions talked about what a beautiful day it was, how honored she felt to celebrate our love, how gorgeous her navy dress was, and how it perfectly matched the wedding colors. I scrolled through the comments. Her book club friends were gushing about how lovely she looked, how wonderful the wedding must have been, how lucky we were to have such a supportive mother-in-law. But then I saw other comments, from people who actually attended. My aunt wrote that Carol forgot to mention the white ball gown she showed up in first. Jake's cousin commented asking why she left out the part where she tried to steal the bride's dress. My college roommate posted that the navy dress was her second outfit after being forced to change. The real story was coming out in the comments. Carol kept deleting the honest ones and leaving only the praise. But people kept posting the truth. My mom texted me that same afternoon. She'd been forwarding messages from other wedding guests all morning. Everyone was reaching out to express sympathy, saying they couldn't believe what we'd dealt with, praising how we handled Carol's behavior with grace. Several people shared their own nightmare mother-in-law stories. My mom's best friend wrote 3 paragraphs about her own wedding 40 years ago. Apparently her mother-in-law showed up drunk and hit on the best man. My dad's sister told a story about her mother-in-law announcing a pregnancy at the reception to steal attention. Reading these messages made me feel less alone. Like we weren't crazy for thinking Carol's behavior was insane. Jake scheduled a therapy appointment the next day. He found a counselor who specialized in family dynamics and narcissistic personality patterns. His first session was in 2 weeks. I told him I was proud of him for taking this step. He said he should have done it years ago. that he'd been enabling his mother's behavior his whole life, that he didn't want to bring that pattern into our marriage. I promised to support him through the process. 2 weeks after the wedding, my phone rang while I was at work. Carol's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. She left a long message demanding to come over and see our wedding gifts. Said she wanted to help us organize everything. I texted Jake about it immediately. He called her back during his lunch break, told her no, explained we needed space right now to establish our marriage without her interference. Carol argued that she was just trying to be helpful, that mothers are supposed to help with these things. Jake held firm, said we'd reach out when we were ready for visitors. She hung up on him. 3 days later, someone knocked on our apartment door at 9 in the morning on a Saturday. I was still in pajamas drinking coffee. Jake was in the shower. I looked through the peephole and saw Carol standing there holding a casserole dish. I didn't open the door. I texted Jake that his mother was outside. He came out dripping wet with a towel wrapped around his waist, walked right to the door and opened it partway. Carol started talking immediately about how she was just in the neighborhood, thought she'd drop off some food, maybe come in for a quick visit. Jake blocked the doorway with his body, told her she needed to respect our boundaries and call before visiting. That showing up unannounced wasn't acceptable anymore. Carol's face crumpled like she might cry. She pushed the casserole dish toward him. Jake took it but didn't invite her in. Told her we'd talk to her soon and closed the door. I heard her standing outside for a full minute before she finally left. Robert called Jake privately that evening. I could only hear Jake's side of the conversation, but I got the idea. Robert was saying he was proud of how Jake was handling the situation, that he wished he'd set boundaries with Carol decades ago instead of just staying quiet, that he was considering his own therapy to address years of avoiding conflict. Jake's face softened while they talked. He told his dad that it wasn't too late to make changes, that therapy could help both of them. They talked for over an hour, the longest conversation they'd had in years, according to Jake. The next morning, Carol sent a long email. I read it over Jake's shoulder while we ate breakfast. She apologized for her behavior at the wedding, said she'd been caught up in the excitement and made poor choices, promised to respect our boundaries going forward. The apology felt somewhat real, like she actually understood she'd crossed lines. But then Jake's phone rang. It was Margie. She warned us that Carol had made similar promises before after other family incidents, that she'd behave for a few weeks, then slowly slide back into old patterns, that we needed to stay firm with consequences no matter how good her apologies sounded. We thanked Margie for the warning, decided to give Carol a chance but stay alert. 1 month after the wedding, we agreed to have dinner with Jake's parents. We set clear ground rules beforehand. No discussion of the wedding drama. No criticism of our life choices. No surprise announcements or demands. We met at a neutral restaurant. Carol arrived wearing a nice dress and makeup. She hugged us both carefully. Didn't squeeze too tight or hold on too long. Dinner went mostly okay. Carol asked about our jobs and our apartment. Listened to our answers without interrupting. But she couldn't help herself completely. When we mentioned our honeymoon resort, she had to explain how her honeymoon resort in 1994 was more elegant. When I described our wedding cake, she mentioned again how her 7-tier cake was more impressive. When Jake talked about our first dance song, she said her wedding band was more talented than our DJ. Robert kept shooting her warning looks. Jake would pause and take a breath each time she did it. I just ate my food and let it roll off. She was trying. Sort of. It was better than nothing. Over the next few weeks, Jake started setting consistent boundaries. He told Carol she could call twice a week on scheduled days, that she needed to give us 24 hours notice before any visit, that holidays would be split between both families, that we made our own decisions about money, housing, and future plans. Carol pushed back hard at first, called crying about being shut out of her son's life, sent texts about how other mothers get to see their children whenever they want, left voicemails about how she was punished for one mistake. But Jake stayed firm. When she called outside the scheduled times, he didn't answer. When she showed up unannounced, he didn't let her in. When she guilt-tripped him, he reminded her of the consequences they'd discussed. Slowly, painfully, she started to comply. The calls came on the right days. She texted before visiting. She stopped making every conversation about herself. It wasn't perfect. She still made comments comparing everything to her own experiences. She still needed attention and validation, but it was progress. Real progress. And Jake was different too. Stronger. More confident. Better at protecting our marriage from outside interference. 3 months after the wedding, a large box arrived at our apartment door. The wedding photos. Jake helped me carry it inside, and we spent the entire evening going through every single image. The photographer did an amazing job. Our ceremony looked beautiful. The reception was perfect. But then we got to the photos with Carol in them. She'd positioned herself in so many shots, standing right behind us during cake cutting, inserting herself into family portraits where she didn't belong, photobombing candid moments between me and my bridesmaids. Jake looked at one picture where Carol was literally reaching between us during our first dance and shook his head. We went through the entire collection and marked which ones we wanted printed. Every photo where Carol had pushed her way in got skipped. When we placed our order, we deliberately left out about 30 pictures. Carol would never see them in our album. The ones we kept showed our actual wedding day, not the Carol show. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I told Jake we should host dinner at our apartment instead of going to his parents' house like Carol expected. He agreed immediately. We called both sets of parents and invited them over. My parents said yes right away. Robert sounded relieved when Jake told him the plan. Carol went silent on the phone for a full minute before asking why we weren't coming to her house. Jake explained that we wanted to start our own traditions as a married couple. Carol said she'd already bought a turkey. Jake told her to freeze it for Christmas. She hung up without saying goodbye. The morning of Thanksgiving, I started cooking at 6. Jake helped prep vegetables and set the table. My parents arrived first with wine and dessert. Robert and Carol showed up 20 minutes later. Carol walked in carrying a casserole dish even though I'd told everyone not to bring food. She set it on my counter and announced she'd made her famous sweet potato dish because she knew mine wouldn't be as good. I bit my tongue. Jake took the dish and put it in the fridge, telling his mother we already had our menu planned. Carol looked around our small apartment like she was inspecting it, commented that our table was smaller than hers, said our kitchen seemed cramped for hosting, asked if we were sure we had enough plates. My mom jumped in and complimented our decorations. Robert agreed that everything looked nice. We all sat down to eat and Carol struggled the entire meal. She kept trying to take control, suggested we say grace even though we'd already started eating, criticized how I'd carved the turkey, explained how her stuffing recipe was better. But every time she started, someone would change the subject. My dad asked Robert about his golf game. My mom asked Jake about work. Robert asked me about my job. We formed this unspoken alliance to keep Carol from dominating the conversation. It mostly worked. Carol managed to get through the meal without causing major drama, though she looked frustrated the whole time. After dinner, my mom and Robert ended up talking in the living room while the rest of us cleaned up. I could hear them bonding over coffee. My mom was sharing stories about dealing with difficult relatives. Robert was opening up about years of avoiding conflict with Carol. They laughed about something, found common ground in their shared experiences managing challenging family dynamics. It was unexpected but nice to see. They exchanged phone numbers before leaving, said they should get coffee sometime. Over the next few weeks, Carol actually made an effort to improve. She called on her scheduled days and asked about our lives. Really asked. Listened to Jake talk about a project at work without interrupting. Asked me how my job was going and waited for my full answer. Mentioned a book she'd read instead of talking about her own wedding for the 100th time. The change was small, tiny, but it was there. She still made comments sometimes, still needed attention, but she was trying. Christmas dinner went better than Thanksgiving. Carol only compared things to her own experiences twice instead of constantly. She complimented my cooking without adding a criticism. She asked my mom for her recipe instead of insisting her own was superior. Real progress. In January, Jake completed his 6th month of therapy. He came home from his session looking lighter, more confident. He told me his therapist said he'd made major improvements in recognizing manipulation patterns, that he was much better at setting boundaries. I'd seen the changes myself. When Carol called outside scheduled times, he didn't answer. When she tried guilt trips, he shut them down immediately. When she pushed for more access to our lives, he reminded her of our rules. Our marriage was stronger because he'd learned to prioritize us over his mother's demands. He wasn't enabling her narcissism anymore. In February, we started looking at houses online. We'd saved enough for a down payment and wanted more space. The second Carol found out, she called with a list of neighborhoods we should consider. She knew a realtor we should use. She had opinions about square footage and school districts even though we didn't have kids. Jake cut her off mid-sentence. Told her firmly that we'd handle the house search ourselves and share updates when we were ready. Carol sputtered about just trying to help. Jake said we didn't need her help with this decision. She went quiet, said okay, in a small voice, actually backed off. 3 weeks later, we found our perfect house. A small 2-bedroom with a fenced yard and updated kitchen. We made an offer and it got accepted. Instead of calling Carol first or separately, we invited both sets of parents to dinner at the same time. Told them together about the house. Showed them photos on my laptop. Carol's face fell when she realized she wasn't getting special treatment or advance notice. But she recovered quickly. Said congratulations. Told us the house looked lovely. Asked appropriate questions about closing dates and moving plans. My mom hugged us. My dad shook Jake's hand. Robert looked proud. Carol looked disappointed but behaved appropriately. No drama. No making it about herself. Just normal parent reactions. We closed on the house in April and spent 2 months fixing it up before moving in. Painted walls, refinished floors, updated light fixtures, made it ours. In June, 6 months after our wedding, we threw a housewarming party. Invited both families and close friends. Carol showed up in a nice dress with a plant as a gift. She walked through our house and actually complimented my decorating choices. Said she loved the paint colors I'd picked. Told me the furniture arrangement worked well. Didn't compare anything to her own home. Not once. Margie pulled me aside in the kitchen and whispered that this was real progress. That Carol was genuinely trying to change her behavior. That the boundaries we'd set were working. I watched Carol chatting with my mom in the living room, laughing at something, being normal, It felt surreal after everything that had happened, but it was real. A year after our wedding, Jake and I sat on our back porch looking at the yard we'd planted together. We talked about how crazy the wedding drama had been, how Carol's behavior had forced us to establish boundaries right from the start of our marriage, how that early conflict had actually made us stronger as a couple. Carol was far from perfect. She still needed attention sometimes, still made everything about herself occasionally, but she was learning to respect our independence, learning that we were a team and she couldn't control us. The therapy had helped Jake recognize her patterns. The consequences had taught her we were serious about boundaries. Our relationship with her was healthier now because we'd stood firm. We were genuinely happy in our new home, had clear rules with both families. Jake's relationship with his mother was better now that he wasn't enabling her narcissism. Our marriage was strong. We'd handled the wedding disaster and come out stronger. We were ready for whatever challenges came next, knowing we could handle them together. That's how it went for me. But what about you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be checking through them later.